Liam stepped into the dimly lit briefing room, the overhead bulbs humming faintly above him. He was in his mid-20s, tall and lean, with a keen intensity that never seemed to waver. Tonight, that intensity was amplified. Word had gotten around the corporate espionage circuit about a particularly challenging job, and Liam had been singled out. Standing across from him, wearing a perfectly tailored dark blazer over a crisp shirt, was Anya, his handler and longtime collaborator. She was a seasoned professional in her early 30s, exuding poise and controlled confidence. Her hair was pinned in a neat bun, accentuating her sharp cheekbones. Whenever she entered a room, she had that knack for commanding attention without saying a word. "Thank you for coming," Anya said, her voice soft but deliberate. "We've received intel that Gemini Biotech is working on a formula that could shift the industry. Our client wants details as usual and is willing to pay a hefty sum if we secure a digital copy of the lab files." Liam nodded, folding his arms across his chest. "I take it Gemini isn't making infiltration simple." A faint, knowing smile curved on Anya's lips. "Security is specialized this time. Internal biometric scanners only allow female staff to access restricted areas. I looked into forging credentials, but the scanners also verify certain physiological data." She paused, letting that sink in. "In other words, no matter how perfect your fake ID, if you can't trick the scanners, you're locked out," Liam finished, scanning her eyes for the next piece of the puzzle. "Precisely," Anya replied. "We've done standard routes for infiltration, but none of them can replicate the necessary physiology in a purely cosmetic way. So we acquired the next best thing, or perhaps the only thing. It's a nanite-based suit." She reached into a black case on the desk behind her and pulled out something that looked like an impossibly thin gray film. At first glance, it resembled a translucent, flexible sheet. But Liam had heard rumors in hushed circles about advanced infiltration technology that could simulate voice patterns, retinas, even subtle bodily signatures. He eyed the object, flicking his gaze between it and Anya's expression. "How does it work?" Anya stepped closer, lowering her voice. "It's keyed to the user's biometrics. In this case, once it's activated, it temporarily reconfigures its surface and underlying structure, forming a flawless replica of a female body. Scanners that pick up heat, heartbeat, hormone levels, everything the advanced security rigs test, will register you as if you were, well, a female staff member. Everything, from the shape of your face to your voice, changes until the suit deactivates." Liam's breathing slowed as he tried to imagine the sensation. He prided himself on staying cool, but this was beyond anything he had encountered. "How long does it last?" he asked. 12 hours, Anya said. "At that point, the nanites lose the charge that holds the transformation. You'll revert. And trust me, you won't want to be inside that lab when the suit dissolves." He nodded, a trace of unease in his eyes. "So I'll have to dress the part?" She placed the suit back in the case, her composure unwavering. "Exactly. Gemini's corporate environment demands formal attire, blouse, skirt, heels, the full ensemble. You'll also need to wear your security badge and a lanyard so no one questions you. The objective is to blend in perfectly." The notion wasn't entirely shocking in an espionage sense. Liam had worn disguises before. He'd played everything from a faceless staffer in a shipping depot to a waiter in a lavish corporate function. But those had been simple disguises: hairpieces, tinted lenses, makeup. This was new territory, where he would walk in someone else's skin down to the subtlest of biological markers. Anya opened a slim folder. "Your alias for the mission is Elaine Rourke. We've set up a credible employee record that references your having recently transferred from another facility. Their system acknowledges you as an executive assistant under Gemini's internal hierarchy. You'll have to speak with a certain confidence, though. If you look uneasy, someone might get suspicious. Even with the suit's perfect replication, attitude is half the battle in these corporate halls. She paused, glancing at him, and something like empathy flickered in her eyes. We'll run practice drills. You'll move, speak, walk in those shoes until it becomes second nature. I want you comfortable by the time you set foot in that building. Liam exhaled, feeling the tension coil in his gut, yet he also felt a spark of determination. Let's do it. They spent the next 2 days in a windowless training space that Anya had outfitted with a makeshift scanner and a small collection of corporate attire. Liam didn't dare activate the suit for extended periods yet. The battery life was precious, and he had to save it for the actual infiltration. Still, he needed to get a sense of moving and walking in the clothes. Standing in front of a full-length mirror, wearing a dark knee-length skirt and a buttoned white blouse over a minimal test harness, Liam felt a surge of awkwardness. He tried taking a few steps, but his posture was all wrong. His stride was stiff, more reminiscent of a soldier on a march than a corporate staffer heading to a meeting. Anya stood behind him, arms crossed. Shoulders back, but not so tense, she instructed. Keep your arms closer to your body, and your center of gravity has shifted a bit in the suit, or at least it will, so lighten your step. Liam tried again, stepping carefully. After a few paces, he risked a glance in the mirror, feeling a swirl of emotions about this unusual assignment. He'd always been thorough, always willing to push himself to the brink to accomplish a mission, but this demanded a different kind of commitment. For a moment, he worried it might prove too revealing of vulnerabilities he had never examined. Yet he didn't let that fear break his composure. Instead, he resolved to see this mission through as he always did, with absolute focus. They practiced everything from walking in heels, only a few inches high, but enough to alter his balance, to speaking in a softer register. Liam drilled phrases like, "I'm heading to the lab," or "The manager requested these documents." Anya would correct him, reminding him that voice was more than pitch. It was pattern, nuance, the way vowels rolled off the tongue. When it came time for a final test, Anya handed him the nanite suit. "Ready?" she asked. "We won't activate it for 12 hours right now, but we'll try a partial activation so you can experience the transformation and see how it aligns with the clothing." He felt a nod of anticipation. "Yes, let's do it." In the training facility's makeshift locker room, Liam slipped out of his clothes and gingerly stepped into the nanite suit. It felt like stepping into a thin layer of cool water that immediately warmed to his body temperature. The sensation was surreal. The moment he sealed the suit at his neckline, it began its silent, methodical work. A ripple coursed along its surface, and in the mirror, Liam watched his reflection warp. His shoulders narrowed, his waist curved subtly, his face shifted. Where moments ago he saw his own features, he now saw an unfamiliar countenance, one that would pass for a woman in her late 20s. His height decreased slightly, the suit compressing his form. Even the shape of his hands changed. His fingers appeared more slender. He swallowed, testing his voice on a cautious "hello." The voice that came out was light and smooth, a pleasant alto. The pitch and tone startled him for an instant. He had studied the specs, but living it was another experience entirely. Anya's voice came through the door. "Everything all right?" "Yeah," Liam replied, blinking at his reflection. "It works." He stepped into the skirt and blouse, buttoning them up properly. The fabric slid over the suit with a shocking realism, as if the synthetic skin were no different from an actual body. When he turned to the mirror, he saw a poised woman in formal wear. There was a momentary disorientation, as if he didn't recognize himself in the reflection. A part of his mind hovered between fascination and a flicker of unease. He left the locker room, and Anya looked him up and down with an appraising eye. "This is what you'll look like during the mission," she said, giving a small nod of approval. "Now let's go through a final test run." They re-entered the practice space. She quizzed him on the Gemini chain of command, prompting him with hypothetical questions a coworker might ask. He moved from station to station, scanning a practice badge at a mock terminal. He focused on speaking calmly, every bit the corporate employee who had done this a dozen times. Occasionally, he caught the reflection of his newly formed silhouette. The suit was uncanny, a second skin that moved seamlessly at every joint. He had the correct heat signature, correct shape, correct voice. Everything was set. During one of the final drills, he made a small misstep in his stance, and the heel of his shoe wobbled. He caught himself, but it reminded him how foreign this posture was compared to his typical agility. He steadied himself, reminded that infiltration was more than disguises. It was blending in, physically and psychologically. Any slip, any awkward step, might give him away. Anya leaned forward, verifying data on a small monitor. "Vitals look good. Suit integrity is stable. Looks like you're set. We'll rest until tomorrow night, then you head into Gemini's main tower at precisely 2100 hours. I'll guide you from the command van." She allowed herself a small smile. "Just be sure to enter with confidence. That building is filled with staff who have no reason to suspect infiltration, but complacency can make them either oblivious or randomly suspicious. Don't give them a reason to check your credentials too closely." Liam nodded, removing the suit and handing it back to Anya. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of final preparations. He memorized floor layouts, tested the data extraction device, and rehearsed plausible conversation openers for the security desk. By the time night fell, a silent tension had settled over him. Shortly after 8 p.m., Liam and Anya were in an unmarked van parked 3 blocks away from Gemini Biotech's towering headquarters. The sky was a muted gray, and neon lights reflected off the glass facade of the building. Liam sat in the back, carefully donning the nanite suit for the real mission this time. It again adhered to his body, the transformation beginning in a wave of tingles. When he stepped out of the van, he was dressed in a light blue blouse, a charcoal pencil skirt, and discreet heels. A black lanyard bearing his forged employee badge swung against his chest. His hair, or rather the suit's imitation of hair, was in a neat, shoulder-length style that matched the ID photo Anya had prepared. The air was cool, and he felt it on his legs, another reminder of how exposed this disguise was compared to his usual infiltration gear. Anya was positioned at the van's console, scanning building feeds from remote cameras. "All set, Elaine?" she asked, using his alias with a faint hint of amusement, though her tone remained strictly professional. Liam pressed the earpiece in place, responding softly in that altered voice. "Ready." He walked across the quiet street. In the reflection of Gemini's wide glass doors, he caught sight of his new self once more. Pushing down the slight flutter in his chest, he moved inside, each step resonating with the soft click of heels. A security guard at the front desk glanced up, giving a perfunctory smile. He offered a polite nod. "Good evening," he said with a calm authority that matched his new outward appearance. The guard barely blinked, used to employees coming and going at all hours. The badge scanned through the front gate without incident. As he continued toward the elevator banks, he felt a subtle rush of adrenaline. The infiltration had begun, and so far, no alarms. In his earpiece, Anya whispered, "You're doing fine. Take the east elevators to the 17th floor. Then you'll head through the lab corridor to the restricted area. I have the building's internal feed, so I'll warn you if I see any roving security patrolling." He stepped into the elevator, joining 2 other employees who appeared engrossed in their phones. The ride up felt agonizingly slow. His heart was steady, but his skin prickled with an awareness that any detail could unravel them. The two employees stepped off at the 12th floor. Once they left, he released a quiet breath. At the 17th, the doors opened onto a sleek hallway with tinted glass partitions and stylized overhead lighting. Anya's voice crackled in his ear. "Go right, then left. A short distance, you'll see a scanner panel leading to the restricted labs." He followed her directions. Soon he spotted the secure door, framed by steel panels. A small digital screen glowed near the handle. He glanced at a discreet camera overhead. By design, the system was female only, verifying the occupant's physiology. There was no use swiping a pass. The only way through was for the scanner to confirm the occupant matched the correct biological profile. He stepped up, allowing the system to scan him. For a tense moment, the indicator glowed amber. Then it turned green with a soft chime. The door clicked open. Liam slipped inside, letting the door shut behind him with a gentle hiss. The interior of the restricted corridor was quieter, illuminated by a few overhead lights. He could feel his nerves intensify as he recalled Anya's briefing. The labs where Gemini Biotech stored their cutting-edge research would be heavily monitored inside. He touched a small device in his skirt pocket that could clone the data from the main terminal. All he needed was to get in and out, but there was no margin for error. Moving carefully, he passed by rooms labeled with various research numbers. Glass walls revealed rows of equipment, some staff members working late. He felt oddly conscious of how his skirt's fabric brushed his legs, how the blouse felt snug around his transformed figure. The realism of the suit was uncanny, and for a moment, it steadied him by making him believe in the disguise wholeheartedly. Anya's voice guided him. "End of the corridor on the left. Go in quietly. That lab should be mostly empty now." He reached the lab door. Through the window, he could see only one technician, a middle-aged woman studying a screen. Liam steadied himself, turned the handle, and stepped in. The technician looked up briefly, her expression more bored than alarmed. "Hi," Liam said in that mellow voice. "I'm just here to file an updated proposal." The woman gave a small nod and returned her attention to her monitor. She was likely used to staffers coming in with last-minute tasks. Liam made his way to the main console at the rear, which was separated from the rest of the lab by a half partition. Once there, he slipped on a small hacking attachment, connecting it to the system's port. A series of lines of code flickered across its tiny screen, forging admin access. Seconds ticked by. The device beeped, indicating successful entry. He navigated to the central database, searching for the files that Anya's client demanded. His hands were steady, but inside he felt a swirl of tension. If the lab technician decided to wander over, or if an automated security check occurred, things could escalate quickly. "Come on," he whispered, eyes on the screen. Finally, the folder containing the research formula opened, and data began transferring onto a portable drive. A bar crept from 0 to 100%, the whir of the system sounding deafening in the stillness of the lab. The technician spoke up suddenly. "Late night, huh?" Liam nearly jolted. He turned, managing a polite smile. "Yes, very," he said, making sure not to let fear creep into his voice. "Sometimes it feels like these projects never end." She nodded, returning to her screen. The data transfer completed. The device beeped once, and Liam ejected the small drive, slipping it into an inside pocket of his blouse. He carefully disconnected the hacking attachment from the port, glancing at the time. He had used just under an hour of suit operation, leaving plenty of time, but no reason to linger. "Have a good night," he offered, starting for the door. "You too," the technician responded absently. He eased into the corridor, trying to remain poised. Once outside, he breathed a careful sigh of relief, aware that the biggest hurdle was done. In his ear, Anya's voice sounded triumphant. "Good work. Let's get you out. I see on the cameras you have a clear path back to the elevator. Security is minimal. Just walk calmly." Following her instructions, he made his way toward the elevator bank. But halfway there, he spotted 2 guards exiting an alcove. They were heading in his direction. For a fleeting moment, Liam's heart thudded. Yet the guards seemed more interested in casual chatter than in systematically checking credentials. He slipped into the elevator, scanning his employee badge. The steel doors slid shut, and the car descended. He was almost free. At the lobby, only a handful of people remained, mostly at the security desk or drifting through the wide open space. Liam crossed through the gate where the same guard from earlier gave a courteous nod. Pushing through the glass doors onto the street, he inhaled the night air in a rush of relief. Anya guided him to an alley a short distance from the building, where the van was discreetly parked. He slipped inside, closing the door behind him. She turned in her seat, her eyes shining with success. "That was clean," she said, a small edge of excitement coloring her normally calm voice. "You have the data?" Liam retrieved the drive. "All here," he confirmed. "We should get moving before they do any checks." Anya nodded, revving the engine. "Let's go." They navigated away from the looming tower, the city lights blurring past. A sense of exhilaration flooded Liam. The infiltration had gone as smoothly as anyone could hope. But beneath that triumph, something else churned. The sensation of walking in that disguise, feeling the skirt fabric glide against his legs, noticing the shift in how people had glanced his way. It had left a surprising imprint, one he couldn't quite ignore. They pulled into a safe-house garage. Liam readied himself to peel off the suit, relieved yet strangely hesitant. Anya stood nearby, fiddling with a small console that monitored the nanites. "The mission's complete," she said, giving him a congratulatory pat on the shoulder. "But we still have a few hours of charge left if you want to remove it now or wait until we're absolutely in the clear. Your call." He glanced at the black bodysuit around his wrists, the slender fingers that weren't his real hands. "I'll take it off now," he replied, though an odd reluctance flickered for a second. Without waiting too long, he moved to the private changing alcove in the safe house and unsealed the suit. It peeled away from his body in a slow wave, reverting to a thin, translucent film. Underneath, his own form emerged, and the contrast was jarring. The infiltration attire was set aside neatly. He dressed again in his usual black pants, a plain t-shirt, and sturdy boots. But as he did, his mind lingered on what it had felt like to wear that other set of clothes over the suit. When he returned, Anya had already started transferring the stolen data to an encrypted drive for their client. She handed Liam a bottle of water. "Well done. You've earned some rest. Go get some sleep. We'll finalize the handover tomorrow." He nodded, exhaustion creeping into his muscles now that the adrenaline was fading. As he left, Anya's voice trailed after him. "You handled yourself flawlessly." Alone in his apartment later that night, Liam tried to decompress. Usually after a mission, he'd feel a sense of relief, maybe triumph. But tonight, something gnawed at him. Whenever he closed his eyes, he imagined himself back in the corridor with that skirt swishing around his legs and that blouse hugging a figure that wasn't his. It conjured an odd mixture of curiosity and residual tension. He rolled onto his side, eventually drifting off into a fitful sleep. In the days that followed, he completed the final debriefings with Anya, and they parted ways temporarily. She was off to deliver the data and handle the post-job negotiations. Liam, with time on his hands, found that the infiltration still lingered in his thoughts. Logically, the mission had been straightforward. Yet the emotional ripple it left behind was perplexing. He remembered how, despite the initial awkwardness, there had been a distinct sense of belonging, or maybe comfort, in that moment when he'd strolled through the building. He had to maintain constant vigilance, yes, but the disguise felt all-encompassing in a way no other infiltration gear had ever managed. One afternoon, as he was cleaning up leftover mission supplies in his apartment, he found himself pausing at the plain black bag that contained the borrowed skirt and blouse. Anya had stored them here temporarily before she could properly dispose of them or maybe return them to a staging area. He lifted them out, feeling the fabric slip between his fingers. A quick memory flashed. Walking with confidence, head high, every sensor scanning him as female. That memory tightened around him. He set them aside hurriedly, ignoring the small churn in his chest. He tried to redirect his mind, telling himself it was nothing, but the next evening he found himself standing in front of the bedroom closet, biting his lip, thinking about the clothes again. The building curiosity was stronger than the discomfort. Eventually, giving in to a subtle trembling in his hands, he reached into the black bag and pulled out the garments. They looked simple enough, just a pencil skirt and blouse, standard corporate uniform. Still wearing his casual t-shirt, he held them up against himself, a faint flush warming his cheeks. This was different from any infiltration drill, from any professional necessity. It felt personal. Glancing around the room to ensure no one was watching, though logically he knew he was alone, he slowly slipped the skirt over his hips. It sat awkwardly because his figure, without the suit, was narrower. Then he tried on the blouse. The shoulders were too big in some spots, too small in others, but he felt a rush of something, an emotional wave that defied his usual stoic calm. He stood in front of a mirror, one hand resting at his collar, as if he still carried some vestige of that infiltration persona. Exhaling shakily, he realized part of him wanted to see how these clothes felt now, after the unique transformation he'd gone through in that infiltration. Back then, his body had been shaped by the nanites, the clothes fitting as though made for that form. Now, out of that environment, the garments strained against or hung loose in unexpected places. It wasn't a perfect match, yet he still sensed a hint of that strangeness, or that comfort, or something else that lingered in the corners of his mind. A wave of embarrassment came over him. He quickly removed the clothes, folded them as neatly as he could, and placed them back in the bag. The entire experience left him unsettled, but also more curious. That night, his sleep was restless again. A week passed. Contract funds arrived in Liam's account, and Anya briefed him on the mission's official success. Yet she noticed he seemed a bit distracted when they met at a cafe to finalize their statements. He tried to act normal, but Anya was nothing if not observant. "Everything all right?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "You've been quiet these last few days. You sure there's no fallout from the mission?" Liam hesitated, deciding how to respond. "No fallout, just thinking," he said, feeling no need to elaborate. She nodded, reading that it was personal and not operationally concerning. She didn't press further. In the privacy of his own mind, Liam wrestled with these new thoughts. He considered how the suit had triggered something beyond a mere infiltration tactic. Anya had mentioned once that part of espionage was psychological. When you become someone else, you touch corners of yourself that you normally keep in check. He had always nodded at that concept in an abstract sense, but now it felt very real. 2 weeks after the mission, he found himself entering a discreet clothing store on the other side of town. It was the kind of place that catered to a wide range of preferences and was known for being discreet. Liam browsed the racks, half trying to look inconspicuous, half aware that nobody in the store cared nearly as much as he did. Eventually, he picked out a simple black skirt, nothing too flashy, and a plain blouse. At the last minute, he grabbed a pair of low-heeled shoes. Paying at the register, he kept his face neutral, feeling a wave of nerves. The clerk barely looked at him, simply rung up the items and gave a polite smile. Back at his apartment, he tossed the shopping bag onto his sofa, pacing around it for a good 15 minutes before finally mustering the nerve to open it. He told himself he just wanted to experiment, to figure out why that infiltration had left such a mark on him. He locked his door, drew the blinds, and slowly, deliberately, dressed in the newly purchased outfit. The fit was better than the old infiltration clothes, though obviously made for a different body shape. He adjusted here and there, smoothing the fabric over his chest. Taking tentative steps across the floor, he felt the garment shift around his legs. It was nothing like the nanite suit's perfect illusions. Yet the memory of that transformation infused each moment with a charge of heightened awareness. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, seeing a man wearing clothing typically associated with women, but also feeling a surprising sense of calm. This was not about a mission. There was no infiltration this time. That in itself was both liberating and disorienting. He noticed how his heart pounded, how his pulse raced. At the same time, he noticed a strange sense of relief. For a while, he just stood there, listening to his own breathing, letting the moment settle. Days turned into a quiet routine. He would sometimes come home, lock the door, and try on various clothes he purchased or swapped in from the infiltration gear. He never went out in them. That was too much. But he repeated these sessions of private experimentation, discovering that whatever had been stirred up by the mission was not receding. It was only becoming stronger, more vivid. He recognized that part of him wanted to decipher that feeling of comfort and the swirl of emotions he associated with it. On a warm evening, he received a message from Anya, inviting him to a small get-together. They had both been contracted for another potential job, and she suggested they discuss it over drinks with a few other colleagues. Liam pulled on a neutral button-down shirt and jeans, nothing fancy, and made his way to the bar. He found Anya seated in a booth, scanning a digital file on her phone. Two other familiar faces, Kurt and Imani, longtime freelancers in the corporate espionage world, sat nearby, sipping their beverages. Liam slid in next to Anya. They chatted about prospective work, discussing everything from new security technologies to possible infiltration angles. Throughout the conversation, though, Liam felt a faint tension between himself and Anya. She kept sneaking glances at him, as if noticing something in his demeanor. At one point, she leaned in and lowered her voice. "You sure you're okay? You seem like your thoughts are elsewhere." He hesitated, swirling the ice in his glass. Then he offered a reassuring half-smile. "I'm fine. Just sorting out a few personal things." She gave him a gentle nod. "All right. If you ever need to talk." She let the sentence remain open. Liam wasn't sure how to respond. The idea of explaining it to Anya felt both terrifying and oddly appealing. She was his handler, but also someone he trusted in ways he rarely trusted others. Still, he chose to let the subject lie dormant that night. A few more days passed, and he found himself unable to push down the thoughts any longer. He took a chance and invited Anya to his apartment under the pretense of going over some new infiltration gear. She arrived promptly, wearing a subtle expression of curiosity. Once inside, Liam closed the door and faced her, arms folded. "I want to show you something," he began, forcing himself to maintain eye contact. "It's related to the last mission." She frowned, concern flashing across her face. "Is there a security leak?" "No, nothing like that." He guided her to the living room and pointed at a garment bag discreetly hung on a hook near the closet. "This might sound strange, but ever since we pulled off that infiltration at Gemini, I've been, drawn to certain aspects of it." Anya studied him silently. "Go on," she said in a measured tone. Liam inhaled, steeling himself. "I started wearing some of the clothes that were meant for the infiltration. Not the nanite suit. Just the blouse, skirt, shoes. I bought more, actually. He glanced at her, half expecting shock or judgment. I can't completely explain it. It's like a memory of that mission still lingers, and something about putting on those clothes helps me process it. That infiltration was so visceral. The suit felt real, being perceived differently. It shook me more than I expected. Anya took a long moment before responding. Her expression was calm. So you've been exploring that feeling. Have you told anyone else? Of course not. He dropped his gaze. I didn't want you to think I was compromised or that I'd let the mission mess with my head, but I needed to tell someone. She stepped closer, her voice softer. Liam, I've seen a lot of infiltration agents. Most of them never question the disguises, but that suit was more immersive than anything we've used before. It's not shocking that you're still thinking about it. Her eyes moved to the garment bag. So you decided to keep going in that direction, even though the mission ended? He nodded. In private, yeah. Anya placed a hand gently on his shoulder. The question is, does this cause any conflict for future jobs or your daily life? I don't think it does, Liam answered, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. But it's become something I can't ignore. I'm trying to understand why it matters to me. Anya pursed her lips, then gave a subtle nod. We all do things for different reasons. If this is important to you, or if it's providing some form of introspection, you don't owe anyone an explanation. You only need to handle it in a way that keeps you balanced and doesn't jeopardize your work. She offered the faintest hint of a supportive smile. I'm glad you told me. Relief flooded him. He nodded mutely, feeling a weight lift off his chest. Anya's response was calmer and more empathetic than he had dared to hope. She put her bag down, took a seat on the couch, and motioned for him to join her. They spent a long while in conversation. Liam explained how the infiltration had been a routine job on the surface, but wearing the nanite suit introduced a dimension he hadn't expected. It was like stepping into an entirely different life for those hours, feeling the subtle changes in body shape, voice, the way fabrics felt. And once he was out, that memory wouldn't release its hold. Anya listened, occasionally asking practical questions, never passing judgment. By the end of their discussion, Liam felt calmer, more assured that these new habits weren't a liability. When Anya left his apartment that evening, she paused at the doorway. I've got a potential new assignment from one of our usual contacts, she said. We can meet tomorrow to discuss it. But I want you to remember something. This job, infiltration, it's about adaptability. We adopt multiple identities. Sometimes those identities reveal aspects of ourselves we never anticipated. He stayed silent, letting her words sink in. Then she gave a small nod and departed into the night. The next weeks unfolded smoothly. Liam handled smaller tasks, and whenever he had free time, he continued his private habit of dressing in more traditionally feminine attire. He didn't show it to any outsiders, nor did he mention it to colleagues. But he stopped feeling the sting of shame or confusion as much. He recognized it as a lingering echo of the infiltration, an echo that was steadily becoming part of his day-to-day mental landscape. One afternoon, he was in a small corner shop picking up groceries when he spotted a rack of fashion magazines. On an impulse, he bought one, stuffing it into the bottom of his bag. That night, in the privacy of his living room, he flipped through it, looking at different outfits, feeling strangely drawn to certain styles. It wasn't about the infiltration anymore, not exactly. He was simply engaging with the feelings left behind. He set the magazine aside after a while, mind humming with a mix of calm and curiosity. Eventually, Anya called him for a follow-up assignment. they met in her new safe house. It was a small industrial loft, scattered with high-tech gear. She had arranged a few comfortable chairs in a corner, along with a low table covered in documents and a laptop. She poured 2 cups of tea, always preferring that to coffee. "Good to see you again," she said, gesturing for Liam to sit. "This next gig is routine. A pharmaceutical firm wants inside information on a competitor's production schedule. A straightforward infiltration, no unusual biometric scanners this time, so you don't need the nanite suit." Liam sat down. "Sounds easy enough. Access their internal server, clone the production data, and slip out." "Exactly," Anya said, tapping a file on the table. "Nothing you can't handle in a standard disguise. But there's a reason I asked you here." She leaned back. "I've been thinking about the nature of infiltration technology. The suit we used at Gemini was cutting edge. There's no telling when or if we might need it again for another job with specialized scanners. If you're open to it, we might develop a better system for you, something you could control in a more flexible way, maybe a partial activation." She paused, searching his face. "I know your experience with it was intense. If it's something you'd rather not revisit, I won't push, but it might become valuable in the future." Liam took a measured breath. The memory of the nanite suit was still fresh, and so were all the feelings that had come in its wake. Yet he also recognized that his line of work thrived on technology that gave them an edge. "I'm not opposed," he said quietly. "It worked well, and if the mission requires it, I'll use it." A thoughtful glimmer crossed Anya's features. "We'll handle it cautiously. In the meantime, for this next assignment, we'll go with simpler means." She slid a small set of IDs and a disguised phone across the table. "We'll finalize the plan tomorrow, then you'll head out in 3 days." He nodded, securing the items. "Got it." After they wrapped up, he lingered. Anya gave him a sidelong glance. "Anything else on your mind?" He considered telling her more about how his private exploration had progressed, but he opted to let it be. Instead, he stood to leave, giving her a calm smile. "I think I'm good." 2 nights later, Liam found himself back in his apartment, letting the tension of planning wash over him. He walked into his bedroom, opened his closet, and scanned the clothes. A neat row of typical attire, shirts, slacks, jackets. Next to them, carefully hung or folded, were the items he had assembled in recent weeks: skirts, blouses, a couple of dresses, and a few pairs of shoes. It still felt surreal, seeing them side by side. Yet it was also strangely comforting. He slipped into one of the simpler outfits, a casual knee-length skirt and a plain top. Under the soft glow of the bedside lamp, he let that sense of calm settle over him. He thought of how each assignment demanded that he become someone else. Now, outside of any mission, he was still stepping into other forms of expression, albeit privately. It felt raw at times, but also undeniably real. He might have originally expected shame or guilt, yet what he felt most was a kind of quiet fascination. Even though he couldn't articulate it fully, he no longer tried to deny that it played a meaningful role in his life now. Soon enough, the night of the new infiltration arrived. This time, he wore a standard disguise: short, dark wig, tinted contact lenses, subtle prosthetics to alter his jawline, nothing as revolutionary as the nanite suit. The target building was smaller, less imposing than Gemini's tower, and he breezed through the infiltration with relative ease. In less than 3 hours, he had the data downloaded onto a drive hidden in the heel of his shoe. Slipping out into the alley, he called Anya to confirm extraction. On the drive back to the safe house, Anya glanced over at him in the passenger seat. "A walk in the park compared to Gemini," she commented. He nodded, eyes watching the city lights. "Yeah, no specialized biometrics this time." A moment later, he added in a reflective tone, "I almost missed the challenge." Anya's brow arched slightly. She didn't press the subject, and they rode in companionable silence. Once at the safe house, they transferred the stolen data to their client. Another successful job completed. For the next few months, Liam took on scattered contracts. Some were small, others were moderately complex. None required the nanite suit, yet that memory never fully faded. He continued his private routine, buying various items of clothing online, ensuring the packages arrived discreetly. As time went on, it stopped feeling strange. Instead, it was just part of his quiet world away from missions. Sometimes he would spend an evening cooking dinner, wearing an outfit typically designed for a female silhouette, and he found it oddly centering. He never broadcasted it. He didn't mention it to Kurt or Imani, or to any of the other operatives, but he stopped feeling uneasy about it around Anya, who sometimes caught glimpses of new items in his closet if she visited. She never made a fuss, only gave him an understanding nod. They never spoke about it extensively. It was enough that she knew he was juggling multiple facets of himself and still performing at the top of his game in espionage. There came a time when rumors trickled through their network that Gemini Biotech, the same corporation they had infiltrated, was preparing a massive new venture. Speculation swirled about whether Liam and Anya might be called again. The day that call came, Liam found himself in a room with Anya reviewing the potential mission parameters. But when they finished, she placed a gentle hand on the briefcase that housed the nanite suit, which had been updated and refined in the intervening months. She looked at him, an unspoken question in her eyes. He didn't hesitate. "If we need it," he told her, "we use it. I'm ready." And he was, in more ways than one. The months of private exploration had shifted his perspective. He no longer felt unmoored by the possibility of stepping into a thoroughly different body. That memory of the infiltration had helped him realize that the lines between disguises, personal identity, and deeper feelings could blur. He'd discovered a distinct sense of ease in letting that part of himself exist, even if it had started under the pretense of a high-stakes infiltration. Standing there in the safe house, with Anya's watchful gaze on him, Liam felt a certain steadiness. He knew the suit might again stir that swirling mix of sensations, but he also knew that he had nothing to fear from it. He would step into the mission, be the agent he'd always been, then return home to quietly explore that other side of his life whenever he chose. Anya gave a faint smile. "Well, we'll see if they need us. In the meantime, I think we can just keep it on standby." She shut the briefcase. "Until that day arrives, we've got plenty of other contracts to look into." They parted ways, and Liam headed back to his apartment. The night sky spread out over the city, lights flickering in the distance. When he arrived home, he slipped off his infiltration gear, showered, and then, by habit now, opened his closet. He reached for a calming outfit, a simple skirt and top, clothing that used to feel alien but had since become reassuring. Walking around his living room, he set his phone down, put on some music, and let himself sink into the evening's quiet. His reflection in the window reminded him of the infiltration at Gemini. That reflection was partly the man he'd always been, partly a figure shaped by the subtle changes in his mind. He didn't have the right words to label it. Perhaps no label was even necessary. All he needed to know was that the mission had triggered a ripple in his life that never fully receded. The echo lived in his thoughts, his routines, his sense of being. And as he stood there, glancing at the faint silhouette of himself, he realized that was enough. He might never fully untangle the complexities, but neither did he need to bury them. He had found something that felt vivid and genuine, something that felt both unusual and strangely comforting. That was his truth, in all its quiet complexity. The hum of the city outside lulled him. He sank into the couch, still in that outfit he had chosen, and let a calm sense of reality envelop him. No missions, no subterfuge, no infiltration illusions, just the unvarnished awareness that in the midst of the corporate espionage world, he had discovered a corner of his private life that gave him a sense of stability he hadn't known he was missing. The future would come with new challenges, maybe more infiltration, maybe different personal decisions, but he felt prepared, grounded in a strange way. At that moment, as the clock ticked past midnight, Liam closed his eyes, feeling at peace with the path he was on. He wasn't certain how everything would unfold, but he knew that the mission at Gemini Biotech had changed more than just the data on some server. It had nudged him into an unexplored terrain within himself, one he continued to explore, step by steady step on his own terms. And that, in this high-stakes life of secrecy and deception, was a rare and valuable discovery indeed.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.